Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Lauren, and today I'm going to be talking about everything that I read in July. So all in all, July was a fantastic reading month for me. I completed 5 books in July, and those books added up to a grand total of 2,704 pages. As far as ratings went, I gave 1 3.5 star, 3 4.5 stars, and 1 5 star. I fully intended to read more like 6 or 7 books in July, but it actually worked out better, I think, reading 5. I was very busy, but also I wound up really loving everything that I read. As usual, I think I will start with the book that I liked the least and work my way up to the book that I liked the most. That way we can end on a high note. So let's just jump right in and talk about everything that I read in July. All right, so the first book up, the book at the bottom of my list was The Escape Room by Megan Golden. It was at the bottom of the list, but I actually wound up really enjoying this book. This is a thriller novel. This is the second novel that I've read by Megan Golden. The first was Stay Awake, which I also really enjoyed, although I do think that I liked this one a little bit better of the two. This is the story of a small group of investment bankers who are invited to participate in an escape room, sort of like a team building challenge, and very quickly discover that the situation is a lot more than it seems, and there's a very sort of dark plot afoot. I don't know if this is true of any of you. Please tell me down in the comments if it's true, but it's like the more and more thrillers that I read, kind of the less and less I began to prefer them. I feel like a lot of tropes that you find in thriller novels tend to be a little overused. That being said, I found the plot of this book to be incredibly intriguing, very well-paced storyline. Also, this book had very well-developed characters. I thought I really liked how the characters, like their personalities and their backstories, which I forgot to mention, this book, it's primarily told in flashbacks, which I really like stories that are told like that style of storytelling. And just overall, this was unlike any thriller that I've read thus far. I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars, which I feel like for a thriller, for me, that's a pretty good rating. Like I said, I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't a perfect book for me. And for me, the glaringly obvious, weak point of this book was, as the plot progresses, things become clear, why this is happening, what's really going on. And that was fine. The why of it made total sense and I could get behind it, but the how of it didn't. It was just too far-fetched. How this could be happening, it was too out there for me. So, I mean, that was a full star off. It was way too far-fetched, way too impossible. Setting that aside, this was a very fun read that I would highly recommend, especially if you like very high tension, tautly drawn thrillers. I would definitely recommend that you give this one a shot. It wasn't a perfect book, but I'm glad I read it, had a good time, and would absolutely recommend it. All right, next up we have The Back of the Turtle by Thomas King. This is a literary fiction novel. It's actually a Canadian literary fiction novel. It has won some literary awards actually in Canada. And, I don't honestly read a ton of literary fiction, though I do very much enjoy it. This was no exception. This was a fantastic book. This story follows a man named Gabriel who he returns to the small village that his mother grew up in, spent her childhood in. And the reason that he has returned to this village is because he's a very brilliant scientist who has created through his scientific research a very ecologically damaging product that has caused some serious environmental issues in this area. And so he returns to this village to see what his work has caused and ultimately to drown himself in the ocean. Through a very strange turn of events, he winds up kind of putting that plan on pause, and I'm gonna leave it at that. Though this type of book, a book that's mostly about climate and ecology and the environment and devastation surrounding that, it's not something that I've read much of. I did really enjoy it. This book, though, I don't think it was truly magical in any way. It did kind of almost have sort of a magical realism feel to it. The story it told, the meaning it had, sort of the takeaways from this book I found very, very important and very profound in so many ways. This book, the characters in it were developed really, really well. The plot was really interesting and very well paced. This book was told in like sort of a multi-POV fashion, like each chapter sort of bounced around to different characters, and I really, really enjoyed that. Really, the only thing that I didn't love about the story was the ending and how very neatly it wrapped up. The author really put a bow on it, and that's honestly not my favorite thing. I like for books to end a little bit more naturally. Other than that, though, this was a very, very good book. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars, which, I mean, I kind of expected it to get a high rating going into it since it is an award-winning novel, and absolutely worth it. I can absolutely see why this book has received the literary recognition that it has. If you are a literary fiction reader and haven't given this one a shot before, I definitely recommend that you do. This was a great book. All right, next up we have The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. This is the third and final installation of the first part of the Mistborn series. This is a high fantasy series. I can't really say a whole lot about this given that it's kind of the conclusion of the first part of the series. Kind of in a nutshell though, what this is about, it is a chosen one story, and it follows a sort of ragtag group of characters who are trying to overthrow an evil empire. This series has one of the coolest magic systems that I have ever read. The magic system is based on the consumption of metals. Different metals give various magical abilities. Each character who is capable of this has a specific type of metal that they're able to use, except for characters that are called the Mistborn, who are able to use any of the metals. I don't know how on earth that Brandon Sanderson dreamed it up, but it is so cool. It is just such a cool magic system. This, of the three in this part of the series, might be my favorite. It was such a fantastic conclusion. I absolutely love the plotting of the story. I love the characters, the way that they just continued to develop throughout the book. The story was perfectly paced for me. The first two novels in the series I found at times to kind of drag a little bit. Not so much with this. I felt like the pacing was just like spot on. This was a very fun read for me. I really, really enjoyed it. I ultimately ended up giving this book 4.5 stars, not quite a perfect 5. And the reason that I deducted that half star, the only flaw with this book for me was the very, very, very end of this book. I thought it had kind of a strange and really a little rushed ending. Like just the last couple of chapters, I don't know. I was not expecting it. I don't know. I didn't love it, but it wasn't bad, and I think it was just more like kind of not for me, but most people probably would love it. But otherwise, yeah, this was a great book. Like, if you haven't picked up the Mistborn series and you are a high fantasy reader, then please do, like, really treat yourself and pick up this series. All right, next on the list we have Before the Devil Breaks You by Libba Bray. This is the third in the Diviner series. It's a 4-book series. This is an urban fantasy series, and it is set in 1920s New York. It follows a young woman named Evie O'Neill and a small group of friends who they all have these supernatural powers that they are using to fight this sort of malevolent force that has infiltrated the city. That is a very bare bones description of this book. It is a very kind of a complex story with a lot of moving parts and very well-developed, well-defined characters. I absolutely love this series. This, I think, of the 3 that I've read so far, is probably my favorite. This book was absolutely fantastic. I adored the first book, The Diviners. The second book, Lair of Dreams, kind of got a little off track for me, though I did very much enjoy it, but this like brought it back around and kind of tied it all together and like kept the plot moving, which I really appreciated. This book, I think, of the 3, definitely felt like it had the highest stakes. It was the darkest. It had the harshest consequences for like the characters' actions. There was a section of this book set in an insane asylum, which I know that Libba Bray went through a lot of trouble to kind of make it as accurate as possible to that time period in that location. And it I don't know, you could tell it was very well researched and well executed. And this by far felt the most like an adult novel of the three. The other two, the first two, have more of like a young adult flair. This felt like it was written for adults to read. I do enjoy YA. Obviously, I wouldn't have picked up the series if I didn't, but I prefer adult novels, so this kind of did it a little bit more for me than the first two in that regard. I wound up giving this book 4.5 stars. Nearly perfect, not completely there, but just almost there. This series, I absolutely love it. If you are an urban fantasy reader and you haven't picked this one up, please pick this one up. This is definitely one of my favorite urban fantasy series that I've ever read. I am very much looking forward to getting to the final book in the series, which I think is called The King of Crows. My expectations may be a little bit high for that final novel, but even if it's not a perfect read, like, this was so good. Like, the series has absolutely been worth it. All right, and last but not least, my favorite book that I read in the month of July was Gemina, which was written by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I'm going to try to not blind you with the glare off of this book. This is a young adult sci-fi series. This is the second book in the series. The first was Illuminae. And each of these books follows different characters. They follow characters who are experiencing the fallout of a corporate invasion of a colony on another planet. The colony is called the Corinza colony. These books are space operas. This one follows two characters who are on a ship that is being invaded. I really enjoyed Illuminae, but this book, I absolutely loved this book. Like, I loved the plot, I loved the characters, I loved the pacing, like, I loved everything about it. I loved it so much I wound up giving it 5 stars. One of very few 5 stars that I've given in 2023. There was just something about these characters and this story that just resonated with me. These books are told in sort of this multimedia style. They're like, it's supposed to be like files that are kind of stitched together after the fact, sort of trying to explain what happened, you know, with this invasion. And so it is made up of like video recordings and audio recordings and just different files and different clips and different things like correspondence and letters and things like that. And I don't know, it's so cool. Like, I don't know, it works for some people, not for others, but it absolutely does for me. This one also was really fun because one of the primary characters was kind of an artist, and so there are like little drawings and things in here that the character did, which I really enjoyed. Though this followed different characters in the first book, Illuminae, it did tie into Illuminae, and we did in the end get to see the characters from the first book. I really liked the way that they tied together. I liked the way that this book ended. I don't know, I'm just gushing here. I liked everything about this book, obviously, since I gave it 5 stars. Yeah, it seems like this is just sort of generally a favorite of the series when you look at the ratings. And I know that I've heard from a couple of you that this was your favorite book in the series, which is awesome, but also it's kind of like this is not the last book, so hopefully I'm going to try to like temper my expectations for the final book, Obsidio. Nonetheless, I am really looking forward to it, wrapping this up, like seeing how this like finally ends. These, I think, if you are interested in getting into sci-fi, these are fantastic. The series is a fantastic choice. In a lot of ways, I would call it hard sci-fi. It has a lot of technical information. However, it's not difficult to follow. It's not difficult to understand. They're fun. Like, they're very fun to read. So, yeah, that's enough gushing for now. Love this book, 5 stars. Pick it up. Pick up the series if you've never read it. All right, so I think that that's going to be it for me today. Those are all of the books that I read in the month of July. I would be very curious to know if you have read any of these and what you thought about them. Also, I would love to know if you read anything particularly interesting in July, as I am always looking for my next great book recommendation. If you enjoyed this video, I hope that you will like it and possibly subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.